Hi again for another episode of Voice from the Clouds. So, we talked about the positives about indie publishing, but what's been the most challenging for you, Roz? What have you found maybe more difficult?
Well, it's always a lot more work than you think, because you have to wear every professional hat, or you have to find other people to take on those roles for you. So if you write a book that is taken on by a publisher, your job really is just the text and then the marketing afterwards. But there's a lot of technical stuff that you don't have to know. And I was quite happy with taking on the technical stuff because it had been my job anyway. But if it hasn't been your job, then you have to find professionals who will be able to help you with the developmental edit if it needs one, the sort of other kind of editing, copy editing, proofreading, various aspects of formatting, getting a cover. Then you have to figure out who your market is. In fact, you should probably start to figure that out much sooner than having the cover done, because the cover has to fit the market. Then you have to figure out places you're going to seek publicity. A lot of those jobs are done for you in a publisher, but they're your responsibility if you take them on yourself. You can go to self-publishing services providers who can sort of step in and fill gaps, and that's another way. But ultimately, the biggest difficulty and the thing that hasn't yet been solved very well is how to reach readers and get into bookshops. If you write a genre that is easy to market, where there are a lot of online readers, then you have a much easier time. So if you're writing some of the big selling genres, you're science fiction, aren't you, Nick? So
yes, I am.
That's going to have dedicated places online that readers are probably going to be quite online savvy, and so you'll find it easier to reach readers than I would with my kinds of books that are probably more for the kinds of people who go into bookshops.
Yes, interesting.
And that is difficult.
Yeah.
You then find that at the moment bookshops don't particularly like taking indie books, but that isn't because they're indie, actually. It is not a snobbishness about quality. It's more because the economics of buying print-on-demand books are not very favourable to bookshops at the moment.
Yeah.
So all these problems will find solutions because there are a lot of people who want the solutions, but at the moment those are difficult. And getting reviews in prestigious publications at the moment is difficult, but headway is being made. There are people who are managing to get to sort of chip down the barriers. And there are quite a lot of barriers, and they're not necessarily because of perceptions of quality. They're because what indies are trying to do is plug into a system that has been working on the sort of big old publishing economics. So print runs, relationships that publishers have with reviewers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think maybe in the future we'll potentially see a hybrid model where the best of indie publishers are working alongside traditional publishers, maybe, where the traditional publishers are offering distribution for the physical books. Maybe that could be part of the future. Yeah,
they could be. And Hugh Howey actually tried that a good number of years ago. He had a print-only deal with a big publisher, and he did all the ebook distribution. I don't know how that went, but and I also know people who have tried hybrid models with publishers. It hasn't gone well yet. I think it's because what probably happened. Well, I know in this situation, the staff, the editorial staff, just didn't seem to have been properly briefed. They were probably overworked. They were probably being asked to do things in a way that they thought was maybe even dangerous for the quality of the book. and everyone just ended up falling out. But that doesn't mean it wouldn't work if it was well organised.
Yeah.
But yes, there could be very real benefits to working together if publishers and authors shared the risk. But then, of course, you might get a very strong and quite valid reaction from other industry people who'd say, well, that's open to abuse. Paying to publish is something that a lot of publishing people have often taken quite a dim view of, and it's been abused quite a lot by certain companies that end up in the news. But it's a minefield, but there are really good things that could be done if the problems could be thrashed out. Going back to what I was saying right at the beginning about literary agents going into self-publishing, when I first read about that, I thought that would be brilliant, because you've got the gatekeeper, you've got people who are knowledgeable in publishing, and the agent could act as a kind of endorsement so that the quality, there would be a quality mark, really. But there were problems because they were worried about being seen to charge money for things that they shouldn't charge money for. And so I think it's been quietly shelved at the moment. But who knows? If indies are producing books that are good quality and readers would like, then there may be a lot of fruitful partnerships in the future.
I think if the indie publishers had commercial success already with the ebook, then it's sort of a bit of a slam dunk, because the sales and marketing team says, well, there is definitely a market there. Look at the sales numbers. And then it may be everybody can take it more seriously and sort of see it as a valid commercial model. There must be something in this, I think.
Yes, I think that some authors feel that traditional publishers don't offer enough for the share they take. And actually, at the Frankfurt Book Fair, one of the speakers said that they were now looking quite seriously at what they could give authors, how they could give authors better deals or better support, because authors have been able to find out more for themselves about the realities and about the things they need help with and the things they don't need help with and the things they'd like to keep, like, for instance, rights.
Absolutely.
Some publishers will try and make you sign a deal that signs world rights, world English language rights.
Yes.
And that's something that you shouldn't necessarily just accept. Also, I forgot what I was going to say, because I can see emails zipping in. We'll have to cut that bit out.
Turn off the email.
Yes, what I was going to say was reversion rights. If a book is published and it doesn't sell very well, it kind of falls off the heap and is not really produced by the publisher anymore. But they might, in theory, still keep it on, because if it sells even one copy a year, it hasn't gone completely out of print. But that's not much use to the publisher. The author would probably love to take that book back and make a go of it themselves, because they might have lots of other resources. So there've got to be, one of the things I think is that there have to be much better mechanisms for authors to get their books back.
Yes.
If the publisher's had a go at them, hasn't been able to do very much with them, or the book has outlived its usefulness for the publisher and what it wants to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have so much, sort of shelf space, warehousing, all the rest of it, and they want to be able to sort of switch their resources to newer books if they feel, and it's very, for a traditional publisher to really take a second stab at maybe an existing property is, as far as I'm aware, fairly rare, in terms of rebranding something or changing covers, all of those sorts of things you can do. Whereas now, with indie publisher, you have the authors who would love to, as you say, have those rights back and to be able to actually do something with that book. And if that mechanism was more slick, I think it would benefit everybody. I think that's a really interesting point, Roz. So let's go back to, let's pull up your book again. Not quite lost. I love the cover. I love the cover. Actually, reminds me of the lemon jelly cover. It's brilliant.
I love that lemon colour.
It's wonderful. Now, what's really interesting for me, Roz, with your range of work, you really do cover a large variety of topics. And, from science fiction now to this, how would you classify this? Is it a travel log?
Yeah, it's sort of humorous travel essays. Yes. Bill Bryson is probably the closest comparison. But apparently I'm not as curmudgeonly.
Bill, one of my favourite books of Bill's is Notes from a Small Island. And in fact, this did actually remind me a little bit. And this is lovely. And what's weird is you seem to have gone to a lot of the same places that I have in this country.
Really?
Yeah, I've just got to the Porlocks section today. And I was there about 3 years ago taking photographs of Porlock Weir, and small world, but lovely part of the world. But sort of going to the subject of you changing your subject matter for your books from science fiction now to this travel log. Do you find your readers sort of stay loyal and follow you from one book to another? Or are you basically unearthing a fresh readership with each new book?
A bit of both. There are some readers who've stayed with me for all my books and just kind of like what I write and the way I do things, which is lovely. And there are some who prefer one book but not the others. And they're all quite happy to tell me. Quite a lot of people have come to me because of the travel book, because I think it's more accessible. But I hope that some of the themes that I'm interested in come through that, and then people might be interested they might notice that they also appear in my fiction. And in fact, I didn't realise until I was compiling that book how much the themes I write about have actually been seeded in just the things I notice in everyday life. There's a lot in the travel book about hidden places and places with hidden histories and ruins and discovering sort of lives that have left their prints somewhere and secrets. And that's something that actually goes through all my work. So I do have a core of recognisable curiosities. I call them curiosities. They're just things I will always want to write about and always want to explore. But for the people who've said to me, I really liked your Not Quite Lost, your travel book, but not quite so sure about your sort of venturings into science fiction with, I've got my other novels here actually.
Yeah, please.
This one is totally science fiction. That's the one that got longlisted for the World Fantasy Award. And it's based in a future country, maybe England. Used to have a lot of greenery, and it's now all been built on, and there's just one oasis of green that remains, with some valleys and hills and a crumbled old mansion. And the story is about somebody who lives there and starts kind of feeling tremors from the past. And that is science fiction. It's set in the future. It's got robots, but in a kind of Blade Runner way. So it's robots with souls, a bit like Westworld.
Yes.
So that's science fiction. The other one, which was my first novel, My Memories of a Future Life, is set firmly in the present. It's contemporary London and then contemporary West Country. I invented a sort of a very small, stuffy town that the narrator goes to. But it's also got a section in the future, because the narrator is going to another life through hypnosis, but she's not going to the past, to a past life, she's going to her future life. It's actually a bit like the ideas of the time traveler's life or life after life, that kind of thing. But for some people, that's just weird enough to be too weird for them, and they preferred the more general kind of present-day recognisable physics of the world, which they got in my travel memoir. But the book I'm writing at the moment, my third novel, is totally based in our physics, in our world. But again, it's got quite a few people who are very haunted by something. Very haunted, yes. But yeah, I think it's interesting because I'm an indie. I am allowed to do new things. There was a time in publishing when writers were allowed to. So Kingsley Amis wrote several novels in quite a lot of different genres and styles. Anthony Burgess was able to. Also, there's a writer who I'm very fond of, Robert Sheckley. They could write wherever the muse took them, and that's actually how writers genuinely work.
Yeah,
they don't just stay in one box. They want to do a lot of different things. And what's often happened is that authors have had to take on pseudonyms in order to write their new departures. But because I think I'm always going to be having new departures, but within the same big envelope, then I just sort of put them all out as me, and that's just what I do, and I'm able to do that because I can make the publishing decisions.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's again, it's that flexibility. I love your phrase of pursuing your muse, and wherever it takes you. And not being pigeonholed into that box. That must be so liberating for you as a writer, that you don't feel you have to shut down an avenue because it's not quite what your publisher expects from you.
Well, I did find when I wrote my second novel, the agent who was representing my first one looked at it and said, "No, it's not for me." And that if I'd been the kind of person who was thinking, "Well, I've got to obey my agent," that would have been that novel just gone,
Yes.
But it was really worthwhile publishing it.
And I'm sure you know lots of traditionally published authors. Certainly you do. I do. And a number of times you hear them having this. You have this conversation with them and say, "Oh, my agent just doesn't like this latest book I've got," and you know it's going to be great. And it's sometimes where books get killed at birth, and you think, "Oh no, pursue that dream, pursue what's going on in your head." And there's sometimes maybe an area that a lot of readers won't be aware of, how traditional publishing can, or the system, not necessarily intentionally, but can close down sort of avenues that an author would naturally explore otherwise, which I personally think is a real shame. But then, this is one of the joys of indie publishing.
It is, but you do find out when you put out a book that's different from the book that you put out before, that you have made a new marketing task for yourself.
It
is harder.
Have you ever thought about using a pen name for that very reason? So different brands of ideas, different pen names.
I did actually write a blog post about this because I interviewed people who were using pen names. I thought I'd find out what the realities were. Yeah. And it used to be good in traditional publishing, where there's a much bigger machine doing the marketing for you. Now marketing is really all down to the author. Even in traditional publishing, it's all down to the author. And it's also much more personal. So you spend time building up a presence for your name. That's and if true. You then have to go and teach people a new name, that's a bit tricky. Now, you could put an initial in the middle, like Ian Banks.
Ian Banks, yes.
Ian Banks, the classic example. But it's a bit difficult sometimes to pretend you're a different person. If you're going to be popping up in an avatar picture or on a podcast being interviewed, what do? Wear a different hat? It becomes so much more time consuming, and you've then also got to feed both online presences with enough material to sort of stay there. It's just not workable. I think it's probably better to just come out and say, okay, my first book was about this, but I'm also interested in other things, and so I'm going to be going into this one. Who's with me?
Yeah, I think I've got this sort of dilemma myself, because I've actually got a sort of meaning of life type story that I wrote, must be 5 years ago now. And there's something, it deserves to be out there at some point. And I think what I will do with that book, and there's another book I'm desperate to write, which is also along those lines. But I think what I would do in my case is I would be Nicholas Cook. So Nick Cook, sci-fi, and all the rest of it. The full name for the slightly more serious meaning of life books. but again, Ian Banks showed how well that could work. That everybody's very clear it was the same person, but they were just by the use of initial what they were getting into, and you could be a fan of both and love both, but they say, okay, this is going to be a culture novel, or this is going to be one of his more interesting, The Bridge or a book like that. It's going to take us down the rabbit hole somewhere, and I think that is maybe a good compromise without going the full.
But in my case, I'd need something like 4 pseudonyms already because I've got travel book, I've got science fiction, I've got contemporary kind of slightly weird fiction, I've got writing books.
You're too talented. You cover but that's
omnivore.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's wonderful. It's a sort of lovely problem to have in a way. But okay, this actually leads me to my next question really nicely. Now, you are a very successful ghostwriter, and what I was wondering is, how do you balance that with having enough time to pursue your own work?
Well, ghostwriting is a huge project, and I just have to kind of map out chunks of time. I don't do a lot of ghostwriting now. I was doing quite a lot at one stage, and now I do the occasional project, but not very much. It's time management. At the moment, I always seem to be scrabbling to find enough time for the third novel, and I managed to scupper that myself this year by deciding to do Not Quite Lost instead. But it was good because it sort of fed me new techniques, and it was a joyous book to produce.
The joy comes through in the words. And it really does. There's the author I know, traditional, Barry Hutchinson, who made the leap across from traditional to indie. His first book was it was joyous to read because you could feel the energy and the excitement of the words coming through. And I feel that's exactly the same with your latest book as well. That it was a book that you so needed to write, and it's a joy to read for that very reason.
Yeah. Yes, it definitely felt like that. And the other book I hope will also seem joyous in the end. But there's also a lot of hard work. There's even a lot of hard work under the surface of Not Quite Lost. It's very carefully honed. But in fact, just a sort of an insight into the editing process. I go through my manuscripts. I'd say probably at least 100 times I would go through a manuscript. So often looking for something tiny, a tiny nuance. But it actually doesn't seem to deaden it. You might think that once you've gone over something again and again that you've actually slogged all the life out of it. But what I find is, because I love the polishing process, I love that feeling of it coming together, and it becomes more effortless instead of more effortful.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
And when I know when I've finished because I can read the whole thing through, door to door, without feeling any kind of interruptions. And I think it's like listening to a piece of music well played.
Yes.
That works.
The tonality, yes.
Yes. So that comes through, and that's, it's a labour of love, really, writing these books and working on them, and having the luxury to give myself enough time as well. That's something that the indie publishing ethic has given me. I didn't have to rush anything out to get it to a deadline. I just took my time. But what were we saying? We were talking about different markets. Yes. I think you just have to hope that in these days when we can have more contact with readers, one of the things like Facebook and blogs, we can draw people more into our worlds and the things we're interested in. So I think that makes them more receptive to more different kinds of work from us. So you might find actually that if you, with your more kind of life kind of books, that if you started talking a bit more about that, just generally in conversations on social media,
Yeah.
When the time came, you wouldn't necessarily have to invent a new name at all.
That's a really interesting point. I mean, I have to say that's what I'm already loving about the shift towards indie publishing for myself, that you are building up a direct relationship with the readership. Now, that's not to say I didn't do this with traditional publishing, but it's already starting to feel much more immediate, and that you start to have a real dialogue. And I love that. That's a really interesting point, that you're starting to reveal almost who you are more. You're sort of it's like you're stepping out from behind the book and saying, right, this is me. This is what I sort of interests me. I mean, my own blog is very much about my inspirations as a person and what I find very interesting. So there's lots of science and quantum physics and things like that on there. But there's books on there. There's things about my own sort of writing journey. But I haven't actually revealed the meaning of life stuff maybe. Maybe I should. That's a really, really interesting sort of point. Homework for me now to go away and think about after this interview.
And you've got time to introduce it gradually as well.
Yes, really
it doesn't have to seem like a sudden thing. You can just say, just get a few conversations going.
Yeah, this is the joy. This is the joy of indie publishing. We can do these things. We can experiment. We can take a long-term view. We can build these relationships with the readers. Now, just sort of tying this into the ghostwriting, there's a question I obviously have to ask you, because it's very, very current out there at the moment. What's your view about the whole furore that's erupted around celebrity authors being ghostwritten? So in children's publishing. So there's been quite a big sort of very vocal response from traditionally published children's authors. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have to admit ignorance and say that I haven't actually seen any of the recent coverage of that. I don't know how I've missed it, because I do have Google alerts for that kind of thing. Ghostwriting has always happened. It's always been publishing's big secret. It's far more prevalent than anyone thinks. There are books that are ghostwritten that you wouldn't think were ghostwritten.
Yes, I know a few.
And also, publishing's always tried to pick authors who they think will be easy to sell, and these have often been people who are already notorious or famous, and because there's a public curiosity about them, and it's always gone on. It's become more prevalent now. I think you're seeing a lot more celebrities putting out children's books, particularly. I think it's because the David Walliams book did really well. So immediately publishers thought, who else can we get? And Charlie Higson had done some books, a young James Bond kind of series. And I don't know for sure, but I think he did write his own books, and I think David Walliams wrote his own books. But because those were successful, of course, publishers are looking around for who can we get. They know it's dead easy to get a ghostwriter to come in and do it. Jordan is well known to have used ghostwriters with her books. It's the way the publishing industry goes. They do actually have quite a big machine to keep going, and these surefire sellers do keep the lights on. So it is something that's economically necessary for them. It does unfortunately mean that because the market has got tighter and tighter for them, that now what seems to be happening is that you can be a really talented writer, but your book will be just thrown on the discard pile. You probably won't even hear from an agent or a publisher when you send it in. But a book gets commissioned by somebody who everybody suspects can't even write. And that creates a lot of rancour, unfortunately. And these are the difficulties. And publishing's competing against quite a lot of forms of entertainment that have become just far easier for people to use. So, books are not the only thing people can do to pass the time. This does mean that we are in an environment where it seems the writer isn't as highly regarded as they should be. The writing skill isn't as respected as it should be.
So my next question to you, Roz. What would your advice be to anyone moving into indie publishing? Now, that could obviously be somebody, a new author, or maybe it's a traditionally published author who's thinking about making this leap into this brave new world of indie publishing.
Find out how a traditional publisher would do everything. So all the various stages of editing and proofing and copy editing. There are a lot of checking stages that go into making sure a manuscript is complete, that it's got all the care has been taken with the details. That quality will mean the reader gets all your content without sort of tripping up over things that are wrong. Mistakes trip a reader up and they make them stop trusting your book. So that's really important. Find out what a traditional publisher would do. If you've been traditionally published, you know this already. I strongly recommend getting professionals to work with who have worked with traditional publishers. They're all available now to work with indies, but they will give you the rigour that you need to make a really good job of the book. And if you'll need a cover, make sure that you get the cover designed by someone who knows the market you're aiming for, because it's a tool to sell to that kind of readers, to catch the eye of those kinds of readers. That's really important. And also, don't just push the book out and then start doing your sales and marketing. Allow yourself time to get a proper marketing campaign and publicity campaign in place before the book is actually ready, because you stand a good chance of getting reviews in publications if you notify them several months before the book is actually out. So there's a lot of things you should do to prepare. In a publisher, while your book manuscript was being prepared, another department entirely would be planning where they are going to seek coverage for the book. And they'd also actually be pre-selling it into bookshops. Now, you're not necessarily able to do that, but you can start looking properly at publicity. So think like the way that a traditional publisher would.
That's fantastic advice. And I know this is an area that you've been exploring with your own work, isn't it? Actually, how to get publicity with the various sort of traditional was it the magazine book reviewers that you've been talking to recently on this?
Yes, I decided I would. I had the book ready by August, but I set a publishing date of the 2nd of October. And between August and October, what I was doing was figuring out where to ask for reviews. And in fact, some of them, just one or two places, had already missed their deadline. They wanted the book 3 months in advance, but usually 2 months is kind of okay. So, that's how far in advance you have to think if you are going to be presenting on a par with traditionally published books, which is what you want to do.
Yeah. That's a really good advice. One additional bit of advice would be blurb. Make sure your blurb is just so, because I was reading recently that most people make their initial buying assumptions based particularly on the cover, followed by the blurb, followed by if you've got an extract of your first 3 chapters, for example, up on the Kindle. Those are the 3 really important things, but make sure your blurb is just so and is hooky and makes if it needs to make you want to read the book. Make sure it does.
It does. It's got to strike the right tone as well. So it's not just a description of what happens. It's actually got to have the flavour of the narrative in the blurb. It can take a really long time. I expect it will take a really long time to write a blurb. I know a book PR agent very well, and he said the blurb is really important. And he said, think of it like a piece of poetry.
Oh,
really go over and over and over it.
I'm sure this is a blurb. It can easily take me a week, and I do actually mean a week of full-time writing, and I've done that before.
Yeah.
In fact, write a blurb and put it away and come back to it quite often, and you immediately start to see things. And make sure you show it to lots of people, get feedback about it. Is it working? Is it really kicking? Look at the blurbs for the target books in your market as well, just sort of do some comparisons, sort of see if there's any themes that you should be picking up on. Fantastic advice. Now, we have got to this moment of the interview, the final question, and it's the most important question of all. Are you ready, Roz?
Yes.
Okay. Roz, what is your all-time favourite film and why?
I have 3. Am I allowed 3?
Yes,
I
of course
tell
you
you,
are.
I write in lots of different hats.
Yes.
So, 3 favourite films. The first one is Ondine by Neil Jordan.
Oh.
It's about a fisherman who finds a girl in his fishing net, hauls up his catch from the sea, and there's a girl trapped in there, and she's quite mysterious. She doesn't speak a lot of his language, and he's a sort of bit in love with her. He takes her back to his house, and she's obviously running from something. And it's like the Legend of the Mermaid, and his daughter also sees it from that point of view. But it's a wonderful, magical unfolding of a love story. That's because it's got this slightly fairy tale feel. It's very well handled. You get more of a feel of the essence of falling in love. It's just wonderful.
Oh, fantastic! Right, I'm making a point of seeing that one.
So that's number 1. Number 2 is similar kind of thing. The Double Life of Veronique, by Krzysztof Kieslowski. It's a kind of fairy tale almost. It's a girl who thinks she's got a double, and she sort of feels connected to her, and the double sort of feels something too, and then the double dies, and there's this sudden feeling of the surviving one feels a sudden feeling of catastrophic loneliness.
Wow. And
the rest of the film is her trying to work through this, and it's beautifully fairy tale. It's one of those ideas again where you've got this fable kind of story that's also a much bigger metaphor. I love stories like that. That's actually the kind of thing I aim to write. That's what I was aiming for with my Memories of a Future Life. The idea of just what does it make you feel to be in that position, and what bigger thing does it illuminate about being human?
Oh.
So that's my.
Well, right, I don't know this one. Okay, this is going to my must-watch list.
Really magical.
And your third film then?
My third original Blade Runner.
That is my number 1. That's my number 1. But I know why it's not my number 1. Why is it your number 3?
It isn't number 3. They're all number 1 for me in different ways. No, Blade Runner. I think it's the film I've seen most frequently. I simply love its humanity.
Yes.
There's the simple idea of it illuminating with robots what it is to be human, and the humans in it don't match up very well to extraordinary Roy Batty, who is is like a child, who's like a monster, who's this immensely vulnerable, emotional creature. It just kind of encapsulates what humanity is. It says one of the things it says many things, but I was talking to somebody about this last night, and I was saying it sort of tells you we're going to die, we're all going to die, all this will vanish.
Yes.
And how do we deal with that feeling? Blade Runner just sort of hits you with it all and leaves you reeling and thinking, gosh,
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's with the first film, it's the what these eyes have seen speech, where Batty's character is hanging on to Harrison Ford's character, Dexter, and saves him. And it's what these eyes have seen, attack ships on fire off the arms of Orion. Not that I really know this movie off by heart or anything, but it's such a beautiful bit of poetry where it's really at that moment that the replicant views all life as precious, which is, and it's a poem of the film, I think, that the original Blade Runner. And I'm actually going to be writing a blog about both Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 as well, because I think the second film is a beautiful companion piece to the first one. But I saw a very interesting analysis of it by the director, and he was saying, actually, both films are films about loneliness. And I sort of thought, I've never really thought about that, but it's almost about the human condition, about how, and if you think about 2049 particularly, about how technology is almost, we were talking about, with mobile phones and people disappearing into them, and that's sort of extending that sort of metaphor with technology into the future, where people are very sort of almost walled off with, holograms they have relationships with.
I actually tackled that in Life Form 3. I was thinking, how we're all isolated from each other.
Yeah, and it's. I think you're right. Blade Runner is about humanity. What it is to be human.
And in many, many ways, and there's so much richness you can see in it.
Oh, all right.
But
I need to write this blog article. I really do. It's been such a personal film for me for so many years, for so many different reasons. But an exquisite bit of movie making with the most beautiful soundtrack. And as somebody who I know is very passionate about music and music to write by and all these things, I think. It is a sum of its parts, Blade Runner. It pulls all from great performances, fantastic visual effects, a great soundtrack, into a fantastic script. Wonderful, wonderful piece of cinema. So, Roz, it's been a complete delight. I think we could probably carry on sort of talking for the next 3 hours. But you need to get off and get things done. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight.
Likewise, yes.
And at last, finally we get to talk after all these years, sort of know each other via social media, so fantastic. So take care, and everybody, make sure you go and check out Roz's latest book.
Quite the right way up.
And I'm about halfway through at the moment. Absolutely loving this, and obviously your other books as well. Fabulous author, a real talent. Check Roz's work out. And so thank you, and till next time, Roz.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Take care now.